So I just invite us all to close our eyes and just take a moment to scan what's actually here now in your own experience. Could be body sensations or your breath or feelings, thoughts, the temperature in the room where you're sitting. So no attempt to change anything, just becoming aware of your beingness right here and now. So our request is to look into vulnerability. And I'm sure most, if not all of us in this group have experienced a beautiful experience of openness when it's outside the body, so to speak. You know, when we feel into the vastness and the spaciousness and the openness of true nature around us. And it's also, of course, within us, but it may seem for a while to be this transcendent dimension. So we wake up, open up, have openings to something that's transcendent. And that feels very safe and secure, really. Maybe not at first, but eventually. There's a sense of not being vulnerable there. However, when this same openness starts to move in the body-mind, it begins to feel like vulnerability often, if not always. Because when it begins to move consciously in this body-mind, it means that we're not so defended. There's been enough openness, enough opening, enough awakening to a dimension that doesn't require so much defense. And as soon as we begin to experience life without our usual defense, without our usual attachment to these core stories that we've been carrying around forever, there's a sense of vulnerability. And those thoughts and feelings that our egoic minds have, how do I look? How am I going to be received? Am I lovable? What do they think of me? How can I get this or that to happen? All of those things are part of how we're defending against actually the feeling of vulnerability, the felt sense of vulnerability. We want some assurance so that we don't have to feel the vulnerability. But I think we could all just perhaps remember a moment or two of vulnerability, or possibly many moments, but just choose one or two. And see what's involved for you in those moments where you feel vulnerable, where you feel naked, where you feel helpless. In all likelihood, vulnerability is a feeling of helplessness, is it not? And what has characteristically at least been your response or your reaction to those feelings of being vulnerable, being open and perhaps not defended in a certain moment, experiencing whatever you've experienced of life's difficulties. One of the most common defenses against vulnerability is anger. We've all undoubtedly experienced it in automobiles when we're frightened that an accident almost happened, or that someone was speeding and we didn't feel safe with them speeding so fast beside us or coming up behind us in the car. And you'll often feel angry about it, but really you were frightened. And you were not in control of what that other driver was doing, or what your parent was doing, or what a friend was doing, or a perceived enemy. There wasn't a sense of being able to control anything. So you maybe become aware of your own energy patterns of mind for dealing with vulnerability when it arises. But just for a few moments, see what it's like to let yourself slip into the feeling if it's here, if you've resurrected it. Because once we know we can be present to vulnerability, we're much freer. We don't have to try so hard to control ourselves or the world in order not to feel this feeling. There's something very innocent in the feeling of vulnerability. These little puppies we were speaking about, or newborn baby, innocent and vulnerable, somewhat at the mercy of environment, caregivers, so forth. Sometimes imagining the vulnerability of the apparent other is quite useful when we're engaged in judgment and anger. Imagine that person as a baby, toddler. We all were at one point. Is it any easier to soften your judgment when you might recall the vulnerability of anyone? The deep-seated innocence that we all have. So how do you care for your own vulnerability when it comes up? Do you defend? Do you lash out? Do you hide? Do you go limp? Do you try to be more powerful? Or do you cower under the table? maybe something just innocently touches the heart. And you're just open. Just open. Just receiving the moment as it is, including the moment that you might feel vulnerability. So we'll just sit quietly together for maybe another 10 minutes and just invite you to explore this topic meditatively, contemplatively, on the feeling, sensing level, or looking into your own responses, however it wants to show itself. There's an intelligence in you that will reveal what needs to be seen when it needs to be seen. And so we'll just be quiet together.